Good evening and welcome. I am Reverend Ann Leiter, although most folks call me Pastor Ann, and I welcome you to Scottsdale United Methodist Church and to this, the Candidates Forum for Scottsdale City Council. A couple of practical things right off the top. There is water in the back, an abundance of water indeed. No one should be dehydrated. That was donated by Vista del Camino, so please have some of that. Bathrooms are outside and down the hall if you need them. If you have questions that you would like to submit for the candidates, we have cards for that. Please write out the question. You can put it in the basket, or if you wave it sufficiently, Denny will come around and collect those, and we can incorporate them into the questions that we will be asking the candidates. It was important to me that we did something about the election here at the church because it's important. It's important to what happens in our community, and we as church members are members of the community. And so I wanted to do something educationally related to the election, and Denny helped put this together. And so we are here, and I am glad for Scottsdale Progress and their participation as well. The other reason I thought it was important is because we have seen a dramatic drop in civility, I think, in our country, particularly as it comes to politics. And in the church, we can model what that looks like. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can have conversation and we can have it civilly. And so I would call on everyone here to do that, that there would be no name calling, no shouting, no disruptions, but rather we would talk about the issues that face our community, that we would do that from a position of civility, and that we can disagree and still keep it civil, because it is only when we talk with the people who don't agree with us that we can come up with a better solution than one we would do alone. And so that is why I wanted to have this. That is why I welcome all of our candidates who are here, and I welcome all of you who have come to hear their position. Thank you all for being here. And we will begin.
Good evening. I'm Paul Mariniak. I'm the executive editor of the Scottsdale Progress, and I just wanted to first of all welcome all of you, thank all the candidates for participating, and I'm just going to go over a little bit of the format with you. First of all, the moderators for asking the questions, we will alternate between Wayne Schutsky, our managing editor, and Pastor Ann. I'd ask all of you to silent your cell phones, and also during the format will be this. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opening and a 2-minute closing. They will have timed 1-minute opportunities to answer questions. For the first 50 minutes, we will ask questions where every candidate will get a chance to respond. And what we'll do is we'll follow the Clean Elections Commission format. We'll start with Bill Crawford, and then he'll give the first answer, and then we'll go down the row, and then the answer to the second question, the first person will be Kathy Littlefield. And then the third question will be Solange, and so forth, and then we'll go back to Bill. We would ask that you refrain from applause and from any other reaction to any of the answers until the end of this whole event. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Ann to ask the first question. Oh, I'm sorry. Introductions first.
Yes.
Bill.
Hi, I'm Bill Crawford, running for Scottsdale City Council. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you for hosting us. So I was born and raised in Ouray, Colorado, a little mountain town up in the San Juan Mountains. That's where I learned my work ethic and my Western values. I've been in Scottsdale since 1996. I've been in business for myself for 40 years. My wife and I, Debbie, have been in business in downtown Scottsdale for 22 years. You might remember my community involvement. I chaired council districts for Scottsdale several years ago, where we brought to the ballot the question of whether or not to divide Scottsdale into council districts so we would have equal representation throughout the city. It failed. So the next thing I did was petition the city to appoint a treasurer. They acted on that and it passed. I chaired the Association to Preserve Downtown Scottsdale's Quality of Life so that we could get some compatibility between the bar district and the entertainment district and the neighboring residential and non-entertainment communities, and we were successful in helping to promote 6 ordinances. They got passed, and now that's a better place. I co-chaired with Betty Drake and Wayne Ecton the Downtown Scottsdale's Vitality Coalition. We worked behind the scenes to do outreach for the passage of the improvements for this Fashion Square Mall that produces 8% of our sales taxes. They told us what they needed to be successful for the next 20 years, and we helped bring that about. I was also a member of the Qualified Armed Posse with the Sheriff's Office and President and Commander of the Mounted Search and Rescue with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office for 11 years, and that helps me with my insight into public service, public safety, and law enforcement. I think I'm running out of time, so thank you very much. Oh, wait. Yeah. Never mind. I thought we all... You and I are going to share a mic. How's that?
Oh, that works for me, as long as I don't tip your water over. Hi, I'm Kathy Littlefield, and first off, I'll apologize for being a little late tonight. The traffic was terrible, and I didn't want to have an accident. I am on the council currently, and I am asking for your vote for re-election. I have worked to be your voice on City Council, you, Scottsdale citizens, so that your voice can be heard on the public debates and on the discussions that we have in areas that affect your quality of life and your homes. I'm honored this election to be endorsed by the Arizona Conference of Police and Fire and Sheriffs and the Professional Firefighters of Arizona. Both of these first responder organizations recognize my commitment to public safety and know that I will work to keep you safe. I'm also endorsed by the Coalition of Greater Scottsdale, PC, a citizen organization here in Scottsdale that again works for the benefit of Scottsdale and the citizens that live here. I'm a Scottsdale native. I've lived here almost all of my life. I'm an ASU grad, and I've been married to my husband, Bob Littlefield, for 48 years. We have 2 children and an adorable grandchild. Professionally, I am an accountant, bookkeeper, and I've held jobs as treasurer for various businesses and charitable organizations. I currently am the part owner and treasurer of our personal business Flight Skills, where my husband teaches people to fly. I believe in being active in the community. I have been active in a number of various organizations, including school activities when my kids were in school, and Civitan clubs, helping handicapped children. I have also many, many goals that I would like to accomplish as a city councilman, and I would like a second term with your permission. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Solange Whitehead. My husband and I moved here 22 years ago, and we fell in love with everything Arizona, and Scottsdale in particular. So we stayed, and we raised our 3 children here. I'm an electrical engineer. I've worked in startup companies, real estate, and I also served for 10 years as an executive director of a nonprofit. I was named Arizona Wildlife Federation's Conservationist of the Year, and so not surprisingly, I also served as a preserve commissioner. In every field, I stay true to 3 principles. Number 1, know who I represent. Number 2, be honest with everybody, honest and transparent. And number 3, be fiscally responsible. Because no matter how much I care about those I represent, if I waste their money, I do them harm. So there's no place that these 3 principles are needed more than at a city government. And this past year, we saw a council majority vote to develop a preserve. And they voted in favor of a project that would misuse millions and millions of our tax dollars. And when we stood up and complained, they voted to deny us a vote. So this disenfranchised the entire city of Scottsdale, the people that they represent. So that's how I became a candidate, and that's why I'm promoting very hard for yes on Proposition 420. But the same misaligned priorities are extending beyond the preserve, and we are facing a critical financial crisis. And the way we're going to get out of that is to restore the citizens back into the driver's seat, because our priorities are what made us the wealthy community we are today. We need to restore growth that enriches us, doesn't degrade our community, and we need to make sure that every single tax dollar we spend moves us forward. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Linda Milhaven, and I'm seeking re-election to the City Council. And for the last 8 years, it has been my honor and my privilege to represent the citizens of Scottsdale. My family first came here in 1974. I graduated from Paradise Valley High School and then went out into the world to seek my fortune. I graduated from college, got an MBA in finance, and started my banking career. I came back to Scottsdale almost 30 years ago to make Scottsdale my permanent home, and served as a community bank president here, serving the residents and small business of Scottsdale all the way from McKellips Road up to Carefree Highway. And as bankers do, I got active with the Chamber of Commerce and eventually served as the chair of the Scottsdale Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm also a past chair of the Better Business Bureau and had the privilege of serving on the executive committee of the National Better Business Bureau. I also, because I know while communities need strong economies to be healthy, I also know that communities have a heart and soul, and so it was also my privilege to serve as the chairman of Scottsdale Arts, and you may know them as the folks who run the Performing Arts Center, the Contemporary Art Museum, and the Public Art Program. And so I have a long history of serving the Scottsdale community from a business perspective as well as a volunteer leader. I ran, I think it's important, the reason I'm running is I think it's important for us to maintain our quality of life in our neighborhoods, to promote private investment, to create a robust economy. That's what keeps our taxes low. And I think it's important for us to do all of that while keeping an eye on the future, responding to changing trends to build a city that we'll be proud of in the future. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is David Smith. I'm running for a second term on City Council. If you want to know any more about me, there's some brochures out in the lobby. But by way of background, I was born and raised in Missouri, and I'm probably the only candidate here that was born in a log cabin. Maybe the only candidate who spent his youth in my teenage years one summer preaching at a country church in Missouri. Gave a few sermons on tithing, and I think from that came my dedication to corporate finance. But seriously, I did pursue a career in corporate finance. I went to Northwestern, got a bachelor's degree in accounting, a master's degree in finance, and the CPA certification, but spent 40 years then in corporate America with a variety of Fortune 100 companies. And at the end of my career was the CFO for the Tennessee Valley Authority, and then after that, the CFO for Amtrak. And the curiosity of these two is they're both government enterprises, and it gives some insight into what it's like to work for a government-owned business, not unlike what it is to be in Scottsdale. Importantly, after I retired, it was 2008, I joined the city as the city treasurer, trying to create a function of finance that reported to the City Council. Successfully did that, and then became intrigued with the idea of actually becoming a member of City Council and working on policies at that level. So 4 years ago I ran, and here I am again. I've been endorsed by the firefighters for their recognition of my background in finance. I've been endorsed by the realtors for their recognition of my interest and enthusiasm for economic development, and by 18 former council members who have recognized my commitment to having a vision for our city as they did many years ago. They made the city what it is today. This is the foundation that we build on. Thank you.
All right. So the first question, and I will tell you most of these came from my congregation. We've been collecting them for a while. What do you see as the future of Scottsdale? West's most western town, or East Los Angeles?
Bill?
Well, I think we will always retain the character of the most western town. And I think that's really important because that ties into tourism, and tourism is huge for us. That produces our bed tax, and our bed tax is what gives us our baseball stadium, a lot of the amenities that we have in this town, a lot of our arts, and a lot of our quality of life things that we love so much. East Los Angeles, I don't see that. I think that we're way too special for that to happen, and that's why it's really important to elect the right people to the council, people that will guard and treasure our city and keep the shine on Scottsdale so that we continue to be the envy of every city in the valley. I believe that we are the best city in the country, and we see that more and more. That's why everybody wants to live here. That's why our property values are increasing. But we have to protect it and we have to guard it because there are those out there that would like to take it away from us.
Well, I think overdevelopment is the biggest threat that Scottsdale faces in order to keep our current character, our beautiful open spaces that we love, our preserve, which we've paid $1 billion for. And I think that if we don't be very, very careful on what we develop and how we go ahead, 20 years from now, none of you would recognize Scottsdale. That's a big concern for me. I don't want us to become a city of glass and chrome and downtown Phoenix or downtown LA. I want us to keep our cachet of beautiful sunsets, beautiful open spaces, wide open areas and parklands that we all enjoy so much. And I think it's a concern that we all should share because very quickly we're losing our open spaces, we're losing the available land to keep for the citizens and for our tourists to enjoy. Mr. Crawford is right. If we don't do this, it will affect our tourism industry, which is one of the biggest industries Scottsdale has. To keep our taxes low. Thank you.
So I will agree, overdevelopment is a problem. What makes us valuable today is, in fact, that we have a rural horse country to the north. We have a beautiful suburbia with sunsets and with mountain views in the center and a thriving downtown. In 2001, the citizens worked with City Council to pass a vision of what we want to be in 2025 and a roadmap on how to get there. The overdevelopment has ceded all development decisions to developers. So what we have is wall-to-wall apartments instead of planned growth that honors our historic roots and maintains our western feel. However, I do think we've already lost the most western town. I never want to be LA. I propose the greenest town in the West and keeping our western heritage. Thank you.
I think part of Scottsdale will always be true to our heritage as the most western town. But our city goes 30 miles from north to south, and so I think we can be many, many things. And I agree with Solange, right? We have our rural north, our suburban middle, and our downtown and McDowell Road. When I ran 8 years ago, we were wringing our hands over what we were going to do with the empty car dealerships along McDowell Road, and so we had to reimagine what that would be. And now we've replaced those car dealerships with homes and new residents that have brought such vitality to that community that we see new businesses springing up. And when I ran the first time, folks said there's no sit-down restaurants. When I ran 4 years later, they said we got lots of restaurants, but I have to wait too long for a table. So it says that what we've developed along McDowell Road has really created a great deal of prosperity. And in fact, the home values in South Scottsdale are appreciating and selling faster than any other part of our city. And so I think our development has been responsible and according to our long-term vision and our long-term plans. Thank you.
As some of you may know, Marion Saba is co-chairman of my campaign, so I'd like you to report that my answer was the most western town is here to stay, and Sabas will thrive in the future. I think, on a serious note, those of you who remember the adoption of the most western town, remember that was really a slogan that was adopted to promote tourism to our city. And we have been remarkably successful in promoting tourism. Now the challenge is to ensure that we do not undermine that tourism appeal in any way, because we need to continually focus on the livability of the community and its attraction to tourists. And there are many things besides being Western now that attract the tourists, and a reputation for arts and culture. So we need to focus on all of this, and we will indeed remain a Western town.
All right, these questions were also crafted by our readers or informed by some concerns that they sent to us. What can Scottsdale do to increase affordable, convenient connectivity between the north and south and the rest of the valley? We have jobs that go unfilled because workers can't afford the travel or don't have commuting options.
And we'll start with Kathy.
To afford the travel between North and South Scottsdale, one of the things I support a great deal, actually, I have talked to our transportation director that I want more of it, is our trolley. It's free. And all you have to do is pick it up and ride it, but I need the routes that will get us to where we need to go. We need routes that will go from South Scottsdale to the airport and to the air park, where so many of our jobs are located. And I'm working with him. He's working on that, and I think that would be huge because we have a facility there that if we could get the main trolley to the Greyhound parking facility there that nobody ever uses, then we could take smaller trolleys into the air park on north and south and east and west and drop people off right at the door of their businesses and then pick them up after work and take them home or back to their cars or back to the buses, back to the trolleys. But we need the routes and the timing to be able to work on that. Thank you.
So I agree. The trolleys could be really important. We had a transportation fund for that has $170 million in it, and it's being focused on roads. But if we have trolleys that have extensive routes and 10 to 15-minute wait times and known routes, this is a really great, we can turn something that's sort of a interest for the tourism into a valid source of transportation for people that live downtown or people that are trying to work in various parts of the city and live in another part. As well, we've lost some of the routes with the Phoenix Transit, and we need to invest back into those so that we have express routes that take people from Scottsdale to downtown Phoenix and from downtown Phoenix back. So the changes in those routes have a very big impact on possibly a small number of people, but a significant population that would be served by having those routes cheaply. So thank you.
I think you touch on a very important issue because you're absolutely right. Our connections and our ability to get around town really is a huge opportunity for us. And what I learned from the transportation director, he said if you need a bus schedule, then the bus system isn't working because you need to have a reliable, you need to be able to know I go to the corner and the bus will be here soon. So we have increased the frequency of the buses, and yet as the economy improves, fewer people are riding the buses. And so it's not an alternative many people find attractive. I think the alternative, in addition to try to find ways, in addition to trolleys and buses to serve our community, is to create more opportunities for people to live near where they work. And in my time on council, we've added several housing projects in the air park that I think I hope will address that concern. If we can have more people living near where they work, then the connectivity becomes less of an obstacle. And the more options we provide, the more pricing variances and the more variety of housing we can provide. Thank you.
Well, I think the traffic in our city is complicated and congested, and many of you experience that. And it is because we are, at the moment, a community that is very, very much dependent on automobiles. But I think we will see in the years to come an evolution to more flexible forms of transportation. We're already seeing some of this. People are taking Uber, they're taking Lyft. We even have the younger generation enthusiastically riding the bicycles and the scooters downtown. The point is that people are looking for a point-to-point connection as they travel, and that's not available sometimes from public transportation, and so we're going to have to develop the solutions to that, whether it's trolleys or increased buses. But the biggest thing we have to do is stop making the traffic more and more congested. Thank you.
So we're talking about a specific demographic that needs to go from downtown and South Scottsdale to North Scottsdale. I can tell you what it's not going to be. It's not going to be light rail. We have completely taken that off of our master plan for our corridor, and we have at the same time committed ourselves to flexible rubber tire transportation. And I think that we're underutilizing that. We're not listening to the people. We're not getting the proper feedback. There's a perfect example of why we need to elect someone that lives and works in the southern part of the city. That hasn't happened for a decade. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, and there's a disproportionate amount of allocation of resources and attention and traffic management and everything else that can be a lot better down here. And that's one of the reasons I'm running. I'm going to try to fix that. It's one of the reasons I've been endorsed by the Scottsdale Area Association of Realtors, because they know that I will go to work for the property owners and the residents down here. I'll increase property values. I'll give us the amenities that we want and that we need. Thank you.
All right. How would you rate the financial health of the city of Scottsdale, and what are your proposals for Scottsdale based on that assessment?
Okay, so we have good bond ratings today, but that reflects yesterday. Today we're facing one of the biggest financial crises probably in the history of the city. We have $800 million of unfunded infrastructure needs. We have $170 million in an account that we risk losing, and that's our tax dollars. And we have looming costs heading our way, like the firefighter retirement fund. So the first step when you're in a hole is to quit digging. So we need to stop spending money on things we don't need. And in June, the city council majority gave $21.9 million to a single developer for 3 roads. That is an item that we don't need and should not be funding. It's 25% almost of our police budget. Next, we have to streamline the projects we do have. We need to stop building sidewalks in the preserve that nobody wanted and we didn't need. We need to look at every single project and make sure it is a need. Thank you.
Well, as you say, the independent rating agencies give Scottsdale the highest investment grade rating, which says that your city is in great financial shape, and I am proud to have contributed to that rating on my 8 years in council. When I first got elected 8 years ago, we were in the middle of the worst recession we have ever seen, and we didn't know where the bottom was. In fact, our sales tax revenues, which make up about half of our general fund revenues, dropped by a full third. Our sales tax revenues are today just back to where they were pre-recession. And in the intervening years, we lost a total of $170 million. And so we cut expenses, we cut people, we cut non-critical programs, and we were able to maintain critical services like police and fire at their highest levels while maintaining our financial strength. Solange talks about the $21 million. Let me elaborate on that. Nationwide Insurance is building a regional headquarters at 101 and Scottsdale Road. They've agreed to spend $33 million up front to build surrounding infrastructure, and I'll finish that answer in another time.
Well, I would finish your speech for you, except I don't know where you were going with it. We do have a AAA rating, and we're proud of it. We're one of the very few cities that has a AAA. But as many of you may know, if you followed my campaign, it is based on the fact that I want to restore us to a fiscally sound and stable future. And what I mean by that is we have not for years reinvested in the city the amount we need to make it sustainable and to work off the obligations that are otherwise going to be passed on down to the line to the next generation. We should be investing $100 million a year in our infrastructure because the city's that big and the infrastructure is that valuable. But we haven't done it. And that's why you see things like bridges falling down and Drinkwater Plaza about to collapse onto Drinkwater Boulevard and whatever. We have $650 million of accumulated liabilities. It's not a matter of just stopping spending money on things, quote unquote, that we don't need. That might have excluded the Museum of the West, but it was a valuable investment for tourism.
First of all, the fact that the city maintained its AAA bond rating, maintained city services, and continued to attract new businesses, including the Cure Corridor, during the worst recession in modern times is an incredible accomplishment. And my hat's off to all of the people who were on the council that led us through those difficult times. Problem we're facing right now is we're $800 million short. And the reason we're short is because we have failed to pass new bonds to cover some of this debt. And bonds come and go. It's like when you're in business, you have to borrow from the bank every now and then. If you went to the bank and you needed funding and they said, come back in 2 years and we'll talk about it, you'd be out of business. So there's a false narrative that was preached that the city couldn't be trusted. You couldn't trust our city manager. You couldn't trust the council, so vote down the bonds. Some of these bonds are now maturing. There's room to fit in new bonds. We won't even feel it. And it's time to get a unanimous decision on the council so that we can pass transparent bonds that everyone agrees on, and then we can go out and present it to the city and the voters to see if they'll approve it for some of the things that we need. I think that's probably our biggest, most immediate problem, is rectifying our city's financial situation.
Well, I agree with that last statement. That is our biggest problem right now in Scottsdale. We do have a deficit that we need to make up, and that's because the city has not prioritized maintenance and upkeep of our current infrastructure. And we need to do that in our budgeting process. It's one of the reasons I totally support a project to go through our entire budget. Every little piece of it that we try to put aside for this or put aside for that, let's put it together and let's look at it and say, are these the top priorities that the city is facing right now? And where can we do more to get the money for our infrastructure maintenance? Because we should be putting money aside every year to take care of that problem. It's like with your home. You put money aside for the maintenance you know is coming. 15 years, you're going to need a new roof. You don't just wait until the roof caves in like we did with the bridges. So that's where I disagree with some of the projections that we have, and I'd like to see that rectified. Thank you.
This is a question from one of our attendees. Who of you support more upbuilding of southern Scottsdale and who does not?
And we'll start with...
Whom of you support more upbuilding of southern Scottsdale and who do not? And we can start with Councilmember Milhaven.
So we still have large vacant parcels in the southern part of our community, and I certainly support seeing more office and residential being built. You know, when I first started working in Scottsdale in the 90s, we were wringing our hands about declining sales revenues and tired buildings, excuse me, and vacant lots. And 20 years later, when I ran in 2010, we were worried about the same thing. And so I think by bringing more jobs and more people to downtown, we'll create a vibrant community. I'm so excited when I drive down Scottsdale Road and I see people sitting on the patios, enjoying a meal, walking their dogs, jogging, and families taking walks. And so I think we can be proud of what's happened in our downtown over the last several years, and I'd certainly like to see more people living and working downtown in South Scottsdale. Thank you.
Oh, I'm going to ask you to repeat the question if you would. It's somebody does and somebody doesn't, but that's about all I got.
Whom of you support more upbuilding of southern Scottsdale and who does not?
Well, I think that's kind of a development question for the city. And, you know, there are many projects that add to the cachet of the city. I'm fond of telling people that when tourists come to town and drive up Scottsdale Road and look at the Optima building, there's a high chance that they're going to look to their left and say, my goodness, that's a remarkable building. We have got nothing like that back home. But many of the other developments that we have in town are not so attractive. They're not so unique, and they're not appealing to the tourists. And I think everything that we do in this city needs to have at least part of its focus, increasing the livability for us as residents and increasing the attractiveness of the city for tourists. Now, I don't know whether that's responsive to your question or not, but it's something I wanted to say. Thank you.
So in 1996, downtown Scottsdale was like the Rodeo Drive of the West. It was hustling, it was bustling. We had the best restaurants, the finest boutiques, the greatest shops. And then what happened? They built Carolyn Commons, they built Scottsdale Quarter, Desert Ridge, and a lot of those merchants left. Their customers left with them. And I got news for you, they're not coming back, okay? So we've had some problems in downtown, and then when Los Arcos closed, we had other problems, and all that I hear from people is we want more. We want more quality of life amenities. We want more restaurants. We want more shops. There's about 3,300 people that live in downtown Scottsdale right now. The economists tell us for this to really come back and work again like it did, we need to repopulate our downtown area and our southern Scottsdale. We need about 8,000 more people, and that's what makes it work. That will give us the amenities and the quality of life that we so desire, that we so long for. New grocery stores, new shops, new restaurants, because the builders and the owners of these businesses will not invest unless there are people down here that will come.
Thank you. I agree with what David Smith said on this. It depends. There are areas like the downtown where perhaps a little height is good, but not in the middle of a neighborhood that's a single-story neighborhood and established there, and you're going to put a condo of 4 or 5 stories right next door where they look down into your bedroom windows at night and you have no privacy in your backyard? No, that's not appropriate, and it's not proper to put that kind of development next door to residential homes. So it depends. One of the things I do like that we're looking at doing is the revitalization of Papago Plaza. That is a huge corner for Scottsdale, right on Scottsdale Road in McDowell, and it's going to be redeveloped. But one of the things I think our city manager is doing an excellent job on is he's holding back and he's not giving approval to a lot of what originally was planned because he wants this to be a signature corner entering into South Scottsdale, and I think that's highly appropriate. So I am willing to wait until we get it right. And I think that's the key, is don't just rush in, get it right. Thank you.
Well, I would agree with that. Growth is not something we're in a hurry to do. We should consider every project carefully, ask a lot of questions, make a lot of demands of the developers, and ensure that the community buys into these projects. And that's not being done today. We also need to make sure that the development fees are updated to cover the actual development costs. And I'm not just talking about a mural on a wall somewhere. We need those developers to pay for new fire stations, new roads, perhaps more trolley routes, and new pocket parks. And what really concerns me is this trend where we're rezoning huge swaths of land rather than considering projects one at a time. This hurts us in a number of ways. Number one, when a developer wants to go up or put more density, that developer, according to city code, should be investing millions of dollars into our community. When you rezone a huge swath of land, the future developer no longer has to invest in our community, and that's a problem. This is how we're getting into this $800 million hole. Thank you.
So this one has a part that's a little bit different for the incumbents versus the folks who are new candidates, so bear with me. First is, what do you think is the greatest threat or challenge to Scottsdale? Then if you're an incumbent, what have you been doing about it? And if you're new, what would you do about it?
David?
Well, I'm an incumbent, so I'll tell you what I think is the greatest challenge to the city, and it's what I thought 4 years ago and why I ran, and that is the fiscal sustainability of the city. We must reinvest in the city, we must maintain the assets that we have, and we must grow the asset base as the city grows and as we try to increase tourism. What have I done about that, other than harp on the issue? On City Council, I have, along with Councilmember Corty and Councilmember Phillips, been part of the Economic Development, well, I am on the Economic Development Subcommittee, but this is the Capital Improvement Plan Subcommittee. And we looked at the needs of the city and identified $650 million of urgent capital needs, not the fun stuff, just the stuff that's breaking. And we're going out this year to raise $10 million against that need. It is still a hugely urgent need in our city, and will continue to emphasize that for the next 4 years.
Well, I agree with David that our financial problem is number one, and I haven't had anything to do with that on either side. But I think the systemic problem that we have is the divide and the inability to communicate and work together to solve problems. And I think that's one of the greatest attributes that I can bring to the council, because I have a proven track record of bringing people together to solve problems. The entertainment district was a perfect example. They hated me when I pushed on this. I mean, it was a terrible thing that was going on for them. And we went nose to nose. I was even sued with a slap suit to try to stop me, which we won, but we kept going. Now these guys were all on good terms. We're on good terms. Why? Because we came together to solve problems with the council, with the mayor, with the police department, with the bar owners, with the non-entertainment districts and businesses and the neighborhoods, and we made it so much better. And they'll be the first ones to tell you that their business is better now. It's way better, and we can sleep at night because we came together, we had dialogue, and we solved problems. That's what I'll do.
Well, the biggest threat to Scottsdale in the long term, over the next 20 years, is overdevelopment. Once we build something, it's not going to go down. It's going to stay there, and we have to live with it. That's why I think we have to be very, very careful we get it right. As far as the financial situation, yes, it's very critical. We have needs for our maintenance of our infrastructure that are not being met. That's one of the reasons, primarily, I say vote yes on question 1. This is for our transportation needs. For 10 years, you'll pay 0.1% increase in sales tax, and we'll raise $70 million for that. That becomes a dedicated income stream for Prop 400 at Maricopa County for $170 million in taxes you all have already paid. So let's get our money back to Scottsdale. If we don't do this, if we don't get this dedicated income stream by the year 2020, that money is going to go to other cities, and Scottsdale will not have it for our own streets. Thank you.
Okay, so I believe that our loss of voice as a community at City Hall has created all the other problems. When we have every single, or just about every single development project approved despite tremendous community opposition, when we have zoning that no longer is worth the paper it's written on, and when we have spending priorities on things that the community doesn't want, this is what creates the financial hole that we're in today. And the way to get back out of the hole is to make sure that community priorities are back at City Hall. So what are community priorities? That means spending every single tax dollar on something that benefits the community, whether it be public safety, infrastructure maintenance, or quality of life. We need to, again, ensure that growth covers the cost of growth, and we have to make sure that the community is part of the decision making, not left in the dark like we saw in sorry, thank you.
I think our greatest needs are funding our infrastructure. As I mentioned earlier, we lost $170 million in tax revenues collectively since the Great Recession, and we deferred a lot of maintenance and replacement during that time. We have a long history in our community of funding these projects through bonds, and I think we need to come back and revisit issuing bonds. I know when Councilwoman Littlefield was first elected, I reached out to her because she had campaigned against the bond and said, how can we put together a package that the council can unanimously agree on? And so I think we need to work together collaboratively to come up with a unanimous decision. This sales tax initiative, when we discussed it at City Council, we didn't all agree that sales tax was the best way to pay for these transportation projects, but we did all agree that we didn't have sufficient revenues to fund them internally from our ongoing operations. So despite the fact that we didn't all agree, we've all now come out in support to say we do need these monies, we don't have it in our existing budget, and we're all supporting the sales tax initiative. Thank you.
All right. Over 50% of campaign contributions in the third quarter reporting period came from individuals or PACs with ties to the development and or real estate community. Do you believe that developers and the real estate industry have had an undue influence on this election? Mr. Crawford, we'll start with you.
No, I don't, and I'll jump in there in a second, but I've got to retort on one thing that was raised. Every single person up here lives in a home that was upzoned. And when it was upzoned, the developers are the ones that put in the streets, put in the infrastructure. So let's get that one straight. Do I think, you know how I look at campaign contributions? I look at them as the people that lead our commerce, lead our infrastructure, lead our development, have faith and confidence, And they express that with campaign contributions because they know that the people they're giving those contributions to is the best hope for leading Scottsdale in the right direction. I think it's great to get that kind of feedback from the business community and get that kind of support.
Could you repeat that, please?
Over 50% of the campaign contributions that came to candidates in the third quarter reporting period alone came from individuals or PACs with ties to the real estate or development community. Do you believe that the real estate and development community has had undue influence over this election?
Yes, I do. Yeah, when you get that kind of money from individuals in the development community or real estate, they expect a return for that investment, and they usually get it. I think that that's kind of common sense. And that's one of the reasons why so many developments have gone forward over time, because you have a majority on the council that does want the development and does vote for the development. So when the citizens come in and say, wait a minute, we're the ones that voted for you. Yes, you voted for you, but it's very, very difficult to run citywide. This is a huge city on contributions of $5 or $10 or $15 or $20 because you're a citizen candidate. Now, we're lucky when we can do that still in Scottsdale because our citizens are paying attention, but it does make a huge difference in who runs and who doesn't run in Scottsdale. It's reality.
So definitely. You know, I have gone door to door since January, mostly to collect petition signatures because we had a city council majority trying to develop our preserve. And so I hear over and over again, number one, that people love Scottsdale, but they don't trust our city council because from Sonoran Heights to the Carefree border down to south of McDowell, they are seeing developments go through that do not match our zoning. The citizens give their best input and they're ignored, and these developers are not bringing to the community what they need. We're getting apartments, but not the specialty grocery stores. So I am a people-funded candidate, and I can tell you that overwhelmingly people tell me that they are voting for me because money doesn't lie, and they feel that the money contributions into these campaigns are destroying our democracy. Thank you.
As I mentioned in my opening, I've been a business person in this community for 25 years, and I ran for council because, like I said, I saw declining sales tax revenues in our downtown. I saw the 202 bypassing McDowell Road. I watched Los Arcos Mall go dark, and I know that redevelopment costs more than development, and so I ran because I believed we needed to make decisions that brought more people to live and work downtown. And yes, I have the support of the business community because they agree with what I'd like to do. Now, in terms of the influence of the money in the campaign, when we ran 4 years ago, Councilman Smith and Councilman Littlefield defeated an incumbent who spent more money than the two of them spent together. So the business community supports me because they support what I would like to do in the community, and money is not always the deciding factor in a campaign. Thank you.
Some of you may remember that I proposed to the City Council that we actually impose a local ordinance limiting the amount of contributions to candidates for political office to $500 for council candidates and $1,000 for the mayoral race. And I did not receive support from that. The reason I proposed it, by the way, is because the city of Tempe had proposed that to their citizens, and their citizens voted 86% in favor of that. Nobody wants to see large money donors controlling their elections locally, whether it's real estate developers or bar owners or whatever. And if you look at my campaign finance report, you'll find it from no developer did I take more than $500, keeping true to my commitment. The one developer, in full disclosure, that I did take more than $1,000 from is Paul Messenger, and he is noted for low-rise developments.
What are your plans for making and paying for the $800 million in infrastructure repairs which are needed?
Well, this is a huge problem, and it's a big concern right now. First of all, I urge you all to vote question 1. That's $240 million for our transportation needs that we can get and get passed on a question 1 vote. The rest of it, I have a major concern. Yes, we're probably going to put together a CIP bond package for citizen vote over the next year or 2, and that will probably be somewhere around $350 million to $400 million. What that's going to actually contain, I don't know, but my concern right now for the city is we are doing some things that are very harmful to the city and to the citizens and to their reactions to doing a bond. And that is, you probably are all aware of the DDC issue and the Prop 420. We have riled the citizens to such a point I have never seen it before in all the years either my husband or myself have been on council. And I don't see, when you make citizens that angry, how you expect them to say yes to more money. It's bad for Scottsdale. Thank you.
So yes, indeed. I just want to say that as a city, we have a long history of passing bonds when the city council and the residents were on the same team. So what we have, we're spending money. Yes, we had a crisis, but leaders overcome obstacles to serve those that they represent. So we can't rely on excuses like we needed to give $21.9 million in June to a developer because we don't have the money. If you tried that at home, you'd lose your house. So we need to stop the bleeding. That's number 1. Number 2, we absolutely must look at the projects and make sure that each project has a need. Again, we're spending money. We put a $300,000 sidewalk in a preserve that the entire community didn't want. We have data that absolutely shows all the apartments that are being built don't cover their cost. Those developers are not paying those fees. They're paying for a water hookup. They're not paying for new parks, not new roads and trolley routes. So we need those development fees to cover development costs. And then we need to get public trust so that the citizens, again, as they always have, approve bonds. Thank you.
So I agree with Councilman Littlefield. I see us coming forward when we put with a new property tax bond. When we put forward the sales tax, it was an agreement among the council, we'd come back with a bond. We simply don't have the money in our existing revenues. I do want to finish responding to Ms. Whitehead's comment about the $22 million. So Nationwide Insurance is building $33 million worth of roads and infrastructure improvements. We agreed to rebate to them their direct tax impact, sales tax and property tax of $22 million. So that means the citizens of Scottsdale are ahead of the game by $11 million of free infrastructure. In return, Nationwide is going to create 5,500 jobs and have a $9 billion economic impact. So net, this is a plus for the city of Scottsdale. In terms of you're paying for development, that's why we don't have the money. Every time we consider a rezoning, we do an independent study of traffic, water, sewer, and if we need to upgrade our infrastructure, then the developer pays for it. Thank you.
A few moments ago, we were talking about the fact that the city needs to be reinvesting $100 million a year. I didn't make this number up. That's the accounting number of how rapidly the assets are depreciating. If we pursue this sales tax bond, and all of us are saying you should vote for it because we desperately need the money, that will generate $10 million. And over its 10-year life, it will generate $100 million. But unfortunately, at the end of that 10 years, while you have that $100 million, the annual requirements will have gone up by $1 billion. And we will now be another $900 million short. Add that to the $650 million, $800 million, I don't know, the number becomes too hard to even fathom. This is our city. It's our front yard. It's our responsibility as fellow citizens to take care of our city, and it's in our economic interest to do so. That is my plea to the citizens. I don't worry about whether you're going to pass a bond or not. That's your decision.
So, unfortunately, political capital, political careers have been made successful in Scottsdale because of false narratives. Just like the city doesn't, when a developer comes in here, they pay dearly They put in infrastructure, real infrastructure. That's number one. When we were trying to pass bonds during 2 or 3 of the last election cycles and in our own city council a few months ago, and we have a party of no getting up there and saying terrible things about our city employees, that they can't be trusted, they'll steal the money, they'll do this, they'll do that. That's wrong. And of course, they're going to be defeated at the polls, but it's a false narrative. We need those bonds passed. They've got to be passed. It's ordinary course of business with municipalities, and that's why we need to have a unanimous agreement on the city council with the transparency of the city voters on board that we have to pass these bonds and get our funding.
Scottsdale is lacking in affordable housing. Labor can't afford to live here. Restrictions have been changed for many apartment developers. Why aren't the developers being asked to offer a percentage of total apartments to qualify for affordable in exchange for proposed zoning changes? Councilmember Littlefield, we'll start with you.
Well, this is something that I faced the very first year I was on council. We had a trailer park down in South Scottsdale off Continental that was sold to a developer, and he gave all the residents who had been there 40 to 50 years 30 days to get out. And it was affordable housing, but the developer had no need or demand or consequence for getting rid of all those trailers. Even though we made them do some other things they didn't want, we got them, we found homes for everyone, but it was extremely difficult. Scottsdale does have a shortage of affordable housing. There's a number of reasons for that. One, the developer has no requirement to replace any affordable housing that he takes away. And two, the neighborhoods where you want to put affordable housing don't want it there to begin with, so then you have an upset from the neighbors. I think we need to have a requirement by developers to replace affordable housing or to put into a fund affordable housing monies for the future. Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to mention that I am an engineer. I said that at the beginning. And in engineering, the results matter. And I just want to remind everybody that we can make excuses, but the fact of the matter is this city is facing the biggest financial crisis looming with multiple large bills coming. So on the affordable housing, we have had this huge upsurge in apartment building, and that was an opportunity missed. But there's a lot of things we didn't ask developers to do. We didn't ask them to help with different forms of transportation. We didn't ask for pocket parks. So those are opportunities lost. I think our best way forward, though, to help citizens is to keep taxes low, and the way we do that is to change the priorities that got us in this financial hole, because we cannot keep burdening future taxpayers by spending money inappropriately. Thank you.
And so Councilwoman Littlefield's right. Whenever we've tried to do affordable housing, the neighbors get upset with what's going to happen. It's an interesting idea to say that some of our apartment complexes might insist on some affordable housing. I do think, though, as we continue to add other projects, that we'll see a better mix of housing. In fact, there's a project currently being contemplated in the air park not too far from the Coles that'll be a more affordable product. So I think as we see future development, we'll see more variety. Thank you.
I think we have a number of programs in the city to help folks that are having trouble with affording their housing. But let me point out that affordable housing is a two-sided equation. I mean, it depends on the cost of housing, and it also depends on your ability to afford it. And really what the city puts most of its focus on is trying to improve the economic conditions in the city, raise the lifeboats for everybody so that the income levels make it possible for people to afford the housing that is traditional in our community. So we have, as I said, a number of federal programs and city programs, but we're caught in the dilemma that the economic recovery in our city, as well as the state and the nation, has raised a lot of the values of real estate more rapidly than the income levels have risen. And that's a challenge that we can really work on, working on the economic development and the income levels.
Well, I'm happy to be an advocate of affordable housing, and we need to look no further than some of our surrounding communities to see what can be done. In Scottsdale, we're already doing quite a few things, Section 8 housing, Operation Fix It, but there's no reason that we can't approach new developments that are on board and figure out a way to have units within those developments made affordable for lower income families. The problem with some of that is sometimes it costs the taxpayers. So we have to look at that as a community and see where the value is. The other side of that equation is let's make Scottsdale more robust. Let's provide more high-paying jobs by investing in new business, like Nationwide, investing in businesses that will come in here, occupy AAA office space so our kids don't have to leave town to get a job, so that some of our people in lower incomes can get better jobs. And that is what is all about, investing and reinvesting in the businesses that are coming into Scottsdale. It solves a lot of problems, as well as contributes to our tax base and our shine on the city of Scottsdale. Thank you.
All right, so again, this is a question that is going to be a little bit different for the incumbents from the non-incumbents. For incumbents, please name at least 2 initiatives you took to secure the future health of our city. And for the new candidates, name 2 initiatives by incumbent counterparts that you believe makes you a better candidate for Scottsdale.
Okay, well, certainly the first thing you have to do on city council is represent or the only thing you have to do is represent your constituents. And you have to know your constituents to represent them. So I have spent the year going door to door and meeting thousands of people in the city, and I was nominated by thousands. One of the things we've lost is our general plan and our vision. So the general plan was a map on how to achieve our vision of 2025. That's basically been thrown out with the development that's been negotiated without meeting those zoning requirements and getting investment into the community. So we need to restore citizens in the driver's seat and get that general plan going again. It's 17 years old. I think state requires every 10 years we have a general plan. But the last time we tried to do it, it was dominated by developers, and the citizens involved were quit in disgust. So the first thing I would do is get the general plan process started again and have it citizen-driven. Thank you.
So 2 things. The first that I'm proud of, and I think we've talked a lot about, which is the financial strength of the city. So the second thing I'd like to talk about is the most valuable lesson I learned is that when we look at new development, that we have a responsibility to talk to the developers and to the neighbors in order to make sure that the projects are compatible. And I'm very proud. I'll give you an example. I'm very proud of the work I did with the Fashion Square rezoning. The Fashion Square is a huge economic engine that helps to keep our taxes low. And in a country where we see many malls going dark, our Fashion Square came forward and said, can we add residential and office uses? And so I met with the neighbors, learned what their concerns. I had many. So the Fashion Square agreed to do road improvements beyond what was required. They agreed to do meaningful open space more than what was required. Where they wanted to increase their height, they agreed to decrease the height to offset it, and they agreed to additional massing. The folks at Optima even said, they said, can we have a courtyard that extends our courtyard, and they agreed to that. So I think it's about finding compromise to satisfy both economic development and the neighbors. Thank you.
Well, it'll probably sound like a broken record, but fiscal sustainability is still the top of my list of things that I talk about, hope to focus on. We haven't spent much time, though, talking about arts and culture in our community, a cornerstone of our community's reputation, cachet, appeal to tourists, and, frankly, a component of livability for all of us. And it's been a neglected part of our culture for too long, and is certainly a portion that I want to spend time on. And also, you've heard me talk about tax reform. We have perhaps the most punitive sales tax that any city can have. We have a tax on food that you purchase at the grocery store. How many other people pay that? Phoenix doesn't charge a tax on food, Mesa doesn't, Tucson doesn't, the state doesn't, but Scottsdale does. So when we talked about affordable housing and helping these folks, one thing we could do is just stop making matters worse for them. Stop taxing them on food, stop double taxing them on rent.
So this is a good question for me, because I don't have to speculate, I don't have to make promises that keeps everybody wondering. I've been there, done that. Those of you that live in South Scottsdale, if you've been paying attention, you know what I've done. I've done great things for this community. I've made it safer, I've made it better, I've contributed to the commerce. So I've done that without a council seat. Just think what I'll be able to do with a council seat, representing you, because I live and own a business in downtown Scottsdale. Done that for a long time. That's why it's important to elect me. And you know what? You might not agree with everything that I say and all my issues on my platform, but I'm accessible and you can talk to me. You can sit down with me, I'll compromise, I'll work with you, and I'll represent you because you're my neighbors. That's important. That's why it's important to elect Bill Crawford to the City Council, because you will have a neighbor that represents you. And also, there's a lot of false narratives out there. There's a lot of things, inaccurate statements that have been said about me. Talk to me and we'll straighten it out, because there's a lot of stuff that's not true.
Thank you. Well, as I said before, one of the first things I did was help the people who were being evicted from their trailers to find places to live. We did a fundraiser. We raised over $17,000, and we found places all over the valley, some of them not in Scottsdale, but we found roofs over their heads, so we weren't throwing out into the streets 80-year-old women or men, either one. Another thing I've done is initiatives to make Scottsdale better, as I've been a longtime supporter of the Scottsdale Symphony. This is a free symphony to all citizens to go about once a month and enjoy a formal concert, and they are doing a Christmas program in downtown in the auditorium, and so I urge you to go and listen to them. They're a wonderful orchestra. They're our orchestra, and we should enjoy them. Another thing I have done, and which I'm very proud of, it was just hung at the airport last week, is I helped get our Stearman PT-17 for our airport. This was a plane used in World War II to train fighters here in Scottsdale.
All right, this will be our last question for the group. The debate over Desert Edge and Proposition 420 has resulted in a toxic environment in Scottsdale. If elected or re-elected, will you be able to work with those that held opposing positions on these issues? And how can you as a council member work to repair relationships within the community?
David.
Oh, I think actually, Linda, yeah.
Well, 420 will be done in November. So after that, we can move forward and look at all the other issues that we have been discussing here. And so certainly I think we need to come together for the better of our community. Since I have a few more minutes, I am not supporting 420. The charter already provides protections against commercial development. We've heard about the money to spend, and it would be preserved taxes may not be used for anything else. And consider this, we have already developed about 100 acres between 10 trailheads and 215 miles of trails. We have disturbed 100 acres for hikers, bikers, and horseback riders, and the Desert Edge is suggesting 5 acres on the edge of the preserve for people to learn about the preserve who either choose to or cannot hike or bike it. So whatever you think of 420, it will be behind us, and I can certainly work with folks on other issues. Thank you.
Well, I agree. Prop 420 is going to be decided by the voters this November. And as we move forward from there, whether it's approved or not approved, we will have to deal with a number of issues in running the city. Desert Edge will be one of them. But let me back up for a minute, because I want to make it clear, I also am not in support of Prop 420. I've articulated to many of you in newsletters and editorials in the Progress my reasons for that. It's not a small change, folks, although it's advertised as such. It's 1,830 new words in the city charter just to accomplish this quote-unquote simple objective. We already have, as Councilwoman Milhaven said, in Article 10, Section 8 in the Charter, language which would prohibit commercial development. And I know you've been sold that you must vote for this to prohibit commercial development, but it's already there, folks, and that's why, and that was 20 years ago we did that. 20 years ago, the voters decided that's the way they wanted to protect the preserve.
Okay, so I support 420. But you know, it's really sad what politics does to the truth, because when you ask the leadership who supports it, they say there's only 2 candidates running that support it. Well, there's actually 3, and I've been on record for supporting it for a long, long time. And I hope that it's resolved at the ballot. But if there's several people seated on the council and leaders in the community that don't support it, but they support me. So in social media, this kind of blew up a few weeks ago. They said, well, how can you support this guy when he's against you on 420? The answer is really simple. I'll answer it, because I'm not a one-issue candidate. And I have proven that we can work together with everybody despite our differences, and that's what makes this whole thing work. It's not a trench. It's not the blue against the red. We all live in the same city, and this terrible discourse that's taken place over this issue, I am ashamed. There's the behavior that has taken place here and the personal attacks. We have to stop that, because this is not the biggest issue in Scottsdale. The sun will set on this, and we'll move on, and I can work together with everybody. Thank you.
Well, this is correct. The decision will be made on November 6th, and yes or no, the citizens will decide this. I support it. I believe the citizens of Scottsdale should continue to have a voice in what can and cannot be put on their preserve. This isn't about the Desert Discovery Center or the Edge. This is about your rights as a voter, whether or not you should have a say, yes or no, on whatever comes along in the future to be put inside the boundaries of the preserve, and if the preserve funds can be used to build it. That's the project. I think that there's been a lot of hype about this. There's been a lot of pro and con and talk and all kinds of things said, but that's what it is. That's what you're voting on. And so if you vote yes, you're voting to keep your say in what happens. If you vote no, you're willing to let the council make that decision. That's what it is. That's why I say yes. You've always had this vote, and you should continue to have it. Thank you.
So yeah, the citizens voted 5 times to create this preserve. And what is allowed and not allowed in the preserve is carefully defined in the preserve ordinance. And up till now, every city council majority has honored that, and they've been trustworthy with the preserve tax dollars. What we found last year is we're not safe with city protocol. We actually have to change the city charter so that we don't have a city council that might make bad decisions or hand over our preserve to development interests. All you have to do is look at the No campaign. The No campaign is funded by development interests. Not all developers, but LA developers, Lake Havasu developers. The Yes side was on the ballot because of 37,000 signatures and is funded by people. Look, we cannot afford to have a city council that is trying to develop our preserve and trying to deny us a vote. That is a red flag. I am ardently supportive of yes on Prop 420. It turns city protocol into the law, and it protects us from having our preserve exploited. Thank you.
So we're going to move to individual questions, and the first one is for David Smith. Why did it take you until October, 1 month before the election, to definitively come out against Prop 420, while for months you would not commit to one side or the other?
Well, that's an interesting question. I really didn't think my position was all that vague. For some of you who receive my periodic newsletters, I think the definitive position that people are talking about is the one that appeared in the Progress as an editorial and in the newsletter just a couple of weeks ago. But in September, I talked about in a newsletter the Prop 420, and I indicated a lot of concerns that I had about it, some things that I applaud in terms of the citizen outreach, the citizen involvement, but the concerns that I had for governance, and it's there, it's in writing, and I said it then, you cannot turn over to an unelected body the right to spend taxpayer money. It's never been done. This is unprecedented, and it would be a slippery slope for our city. I made it clear in that editorial that, bottom line, I had more grave concerns, and, you know, if you couldn't figure out which way I was voting, then I suggest you go back and read that piece.
All right, this one is for Councilmember Milhaven. There is no infrastructure to support the growth of homes and multifamily that you speak about in southern Scottsdale. There is an overcrowded post office, only one grocery store. How are you planning to bring more of that needed infrastructure to southern Scottsdale?
So business people choose to do business where they have enough customers. And so I remember back in when I was building bank branches and talking with folks, it takes about 10,000, 20,000 households to support a supermarket. And so as we bring more people to live downtown, it will support those additional businesses. In fact, the redevelopment of Papago Plaza that Councilwoman Littlefield talked about they are in fact talking about including a supermarket and some neighborhood retail. And so as we have enough people to serve as customers of these businesses, then I think we will see more businesses in a greater variety, and particularly neighborhood services.
All right, for Solange Whitehead. The Desert Edge, or DDC, issue has played a central role in your campaign, leading some to describe you as a one-issue candidate. What other key issues are facing Scottsdale, in your opinion, and why are you qualified to address them?
Okay, so the Desert Edge got my attention. I was busy raising 3 kids, and actually I was planning on having a year off, so my youngest just went to college. So the Desert Edge is a symbol of what's missing at City Council. We have development that is our development decisions that have been ceded to developers. And when you have $10,000 of LA developer funds flowing in to defeat Prop 420, they're not looking out for your interest. So what we need to do is we need to put the citizens back in the driver's seat. We need to restore our priorities at City Hall, and we need to make sure that the growth we see in the future enriches us, doesn't make us poorer, and we need to make sure that our quality of life, our public safety, and our infrastructure are always maintained. No excuses. That's our priorities. Thank you.
This is for Councilmember Littlefield. Why do you support voting yes on 420 versus retaining the council's power to determine future building on the preserve?
Well, a number of reasons. One is the financial reason. For a city that's $800 million in debt, we're going to put in more infrastructure, which will need to be maintained, at the cost of the annuity, which we were going to put in to maintain the preserve, and at a $2 million deficit on our annual general fund budget. So that's part of the reason it doesn't make financial sense. The other part of the reason is citizens have always had this voice. Now it's going to be gone. The ordinance is no longer strong enough to uphold the citizens' rights and what the citizens voted on, because it can be changed with 4 votes on the council. The city charter cannot be changed unless you, the citizens, vote to change it. We have done this many a times. It's not a new idea. I know there's at least 17 charter changes in the last 10 years. So it's not something difficult or different, but it needs to be done if you want to protect your preserve.
Mr. Crawford, the city charter has been described by some as akin to the Constitution, which should not be altered except in extreme circumstances. Do you at all agree with this sentiment, and do you believe there are any risks involved in amending the charter as it pertains to the city's management of McDowell-Sonoran Preserve land?
Well, if we're talking about the Constitution, I'm a constitutionalist, and I believe that it should not be changed under any circumstances whatsoever. The city charter is a little bit different because Scottsdale is an evolving city. It was only founded in 1952, I think, and many changes have taken place since then. Just since I've been here, I think the charter has been amended at least a dozen times. And I don't believe that is a major misstep. And in this particular instance, we're not talking about city employees, roads and bridges, taxes, zoning for houses. We're talking about a piece of property that has been carved out, and the citizens agreed to protect this and preserve it for perpetuity. They voted on it 5 times to do this. They taxed themselves $1 billion to put these 30,000 acres together. I believe if there's going to be a fundamental change to the land use of that preserve, it should be decided on by the people that paid for it. And I don't see that that's a significant change to the charter.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to go into the final portion of the evening with closing statements by the candidates, and I think we'll start in reverse with Mr. Smith.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation here tonight and for the progress hosting this, and certainly for the church providing the venue, but mostly for all of you attending. Again, I am running for a second term. I'd love to have your support. I only want one of your 3 votes. You'll have 3 votes for council, and I urge you to cast one of them at least for what I consider myself to be the financial professional on council. The issues that I will continue to fight for have been defined in my first term. I'm going to fight for continued, well, not continued, but to get us on a fiscal path of sustainability. We've talked a lot about capital investments. We haven't even mentioned a $250 million liability that the city has accumulated for pensions. We need to work on all of these liabilities to get ourselves back on a sound footing. The reason we have a AAA rating in the city is because of all of you. The value of your properties support the financial strength of the city. It's not because we're managing it all terribly well, and I think that's a big distinction that we have to live up to. I'm also, as I said, going to work to restore our status and our posture and our recognition as a community of arts and culture. In my judgment, other communities are stealing this from us, whether they have special taxes to build beautiful theaters or whatever they're doing. But particularly, we need to cherish the downtown area, which is, if you will, one of our largest man-made tourist attractions, and its focus is also on arts and culture. And finally, I want to see us as a community get behind a general plan and update the old general plan that we're still living off of, last passed by the citizens in the year 2000. There's a lot to be done. Prop 420 will be behind us. After that, there's a city to run, and I'd like to be part of running it. Thank you.
I'm going to use part of my closing time to respond to some of the comments about 420 and the Desert Edge, because it really is 2 separate issues. One is amending the charter, and as David said, the charter already includes a section that reads, "The city shall not convey ownership or grant any easement, lease, lien, or other real property interest in any land designated as preserve." It would be impossible to allow commercial development that nobody wants anyway, given that. And so this comes out of folks not wanting the Desert Edge. And again, I would say to you, we spent $1 billion to preserve 30,000 acres. We've used our preserve tax to build trailheads and 215 miles of trails that disturbed 100 acres of our preserve. What we're saying is, if you were a citizen who helped pay for this preserve and you're not a hiker, a biker, or a horseback rider, we do not want to let you use 6 acres as a visitor center that you can learn about the desert. It is not commercial development. So for my closing comments, it has been my honor and my privilege to serve you. I think I've had the opportunity today to share a lot of what I'm proud of. I'm proud of the financial strength of our city. I'm proud of the vibrancy of South Scottsdale and the amazing appreciation of home values. And I'm proud of the work I've done negotiating development projects to respond to the needs of the neighbors. I have been endorsed by Mayor Lane, by Councilwoman Cordy, Councilwoman Suzanne Clapp, by the Scottsdale Association of Realtors, and by the firefighters. I hope you will support me and allow me to continue to represent you and work on your behalf. My name is Linda Milhaven. Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to add to that. As you can see, we're on different sides on this. Listen, We had 37,000 signers that said they want to continue to have a vote. The Desert Discovery Center, no matter what cost it is, breaches the preserve ordinance and threatens our entire billion-dollar investment. And secondly, my gosh, our bridges are falling down. When are we going to stop spending money on things we don't need? So, for my closing remarks, I want to thank Pastor Ann and the entire congregation and all of you and the Progress for hosting this. I also want to thank all the leaders in this community that have endorsed and supported me throughout this campaign. Mayor Mary Manross is my campaign chair. She's here in the audience, former mayor. And the Coalition of Greater Scottsdale, PC, also endorsed me. And of course, I had over 2,300 residents nominate me to run for office. Going door to door, as I have, collecting the signatures to protect the preserve, I reinforce what I already knew about Scottsdale. Scottsdale's a remarkable community. We have a kind, united citizenry. There is no division that I can find in the community, and I'm talking from McKellips all the way up to Carefree. And we want to protect our preserve, and everything of value in this community was voter approved. So why is there such a concern about voter approval for this? And I want to talk about the Greenbelt. The federal government, they wanted to build a drainage ditch through our city, but our citizens believed, they envisioned a green belt. Where would we be without a green belt? Fortunately, we had a city council that was a partner with the city, and it was a voter-approved project, as was our preserve, as was our stadium. This city is valuable because we've always had a city council that represented our interests and put things up for a vote. So I do want to say I will continue to be your friend and advocate on city council. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and good evening. I'm Kathy Littlefield. I too would like to thank you all for hosting this forum and putting it together, letting people hear what we have to say, whether they like it or whether they don't. During this election, I have been honored to get the endorsements of both the police and the firefighters, as well as COGS PC, the citizens organization to represent the citizens here in Scottsdale. Over the past 4 years, I have made good on my pledge to you to be your voice in Scottsdale and on the council. I have done my best to listen to you and to work for you, to make Scottsdale what you envision it and what we all love to see here in Scottsdale, a beautiful and charming city. Along that line, I do hope that you vote yes on Prop 420 and yes on question 1 on your ballots. I won't go into all the details. You've heard them all. You make up your own mind, but we need to have both yeses. If reelected, I will continue to work for you as I have done in the past. I believe this is the definition of a council member, to serve the citizens that put them there in those chairs. If you believe that too, I ask for the honor of your continued support and for your vote. Let me continue to serve you, to be your voice on council, to protect your neighborhoods, to protect our preserve, to guard your rights, and to use your tax dollars wisely. Thank you very much.
I'm Bill Crawford, and won't we all be glad when 420 is resolved, huh? But you know, I want you to think about something, because it started off as a really good proposition and a really good conversation, but unfortunately, I think it's also being used as a platform to promote the candidacy of a couple of people running. And if your main goal was to pass 420, why wouldn't you embellish and welcome everyone in that supports it, but you would instead press out false information and say there's only 2 that support it. So my name's Bill Crawford. I've got a track history of getting a lot of things done. There's a reason that I've been promoted to leadership, chairman of the board, president of most of the organizations I've ever served in. It's because I get things done. I'm tough, I'm fair, I've got great leadership skills, and I'm smart because I've remained in business for 42 years on my own. And everything I have I've earned by myself, of course with the help of my lovely wife Debbie. She works here with me in downtown Scottsdale for 20 years. I've been endorsed by the Scottsdale Area Association of Realtors. I've been endorsed by Arizona Multi-Housing, our mayor, Virginia Corte, Betty Drake, Wayne Ecton, and many, 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 many more. I'd be here for a long time telling you that. So you can find out more about me by looking at my website, crawford4scottsdale.com. You can talk to me. I'm accessible. Most of you know where my business is in downtown Scottsdale. Be more than happy to walk you through any position that I have, listen to your concerns, and remember, we need a representation downtown. It's been a long time, over 10 years. I think Kevin Osterman was the last one that was elected that lived south of Shea Boulevard, and that was 10 years ago. So you know what I can do, because I've already been doing it. I will continue to do the same thing. Please vote for me. Thank you so much for hosting this event.
And thank you. Thank you, candidates. Thank you, Scottsdale Progress. And thank all of you for coming. I know we didn't get to every question, but we got to most of them, and I do appreciate the questions. They are what fueled this conversation. And I also want to thank our candidates for keeping it indeed a conversation with each other and with us so that we could know more about you, more about the issues, and be able to be engaged and informed voters. I encourage everyone to vote and encourage all those you know to vote. We know how much that matters, not just to the folks up there, but to us and to how our community is run. So thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. Be safe as you go home, and we will see you on Election Day.
Nice to be with you. Well, David, I missed you. That was the first time. First time we ever went together. I know, and Kathy was fun sitting next to you. I just saw you back there. You don't know. You don't time. I think these are hot.